Hello everyone and welcome to this panel discussion for International Women's Day. I'm Hannah Harrison, I'm the Business Director of GTI Recruiting Solutions, and on behalf of Target Jobs and Grad Island, I'm really delighted to welcome you here and thank you for joining today to find out more about breaking the bias in the workplace. We've got a fantastic panel of women from across the industry. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to you shortly. But the purpose of this session is to discuss gender bias in the workplace and the actions that we all need to take to make a lasting change for the next generation. We're going to be sharing our experiences and hopefully sharing with you some tips and advice to help you embark on your careers. There's going to be lots of opportunity for you to ask questions. There's a question box to the side of the screen, so please do share some questions. We'll try and feed them into the chat, but also have some time at the end to answer any questions that you may have. Just a little about me as your host. I've been working in early careers recruitment for just over 20 years. 15 of those have been with GTI, and I've also worked as an in-house recruiter for the UK regulator. And these days I head up GTI Recruiting Solutions, which is all about supporting people in their early career and supporting recruiters to help students realise their potential. So, on to the main event. Let's find out a little bit more about the panel. I'm going to go to each of them individually just to ask them to introduce themselves to you and just tell the audience a little bit about your current role and what was your journey to get where you are today. So I'm going to start, if I may, with Elaine. Do you mind kicking things off for us?
No problem at all, Hannah. It's lovely to be here. I'm Elaine Harney. My pronouns are she, her and hers. I am currently the Early Careers Programme Manager at Fidelity Investments in Ireland. And in my role, I have the pleasure of working with and supporting students as they make their transition from college. I'm responsible for engaging with students on campus, our relationships with universities, all of our early career hiring efforts. I also manage our intern program and one of our graduate programs on the business side of our organization. And I suppose I really enjoy the variety within my role. No 2 days are ever the same. I could be on campus one day, hosting an assessment centre another, working with students on placement, and partnering with our internal business leaders and my other colleagues across the globe in other Fidelity locations. I started my career working in a public relations consultancy in Dublin as an executive assistant. And it was there that I built the foundations of my career and gained a wide range of transferable skills. And during that time, I suppose I completed my studies. I did a diploma in public relations and event management part-time. But I also discovered the various areas of work that I liked and a little bit about what I didn't like so much. So when it came to transitioning out of that role, and out of that organization and into Fidelity, what I was really looking for within the organization was how I could continue to grow and develop. I've just celebrated my 15-year anniversary at Fidelity. And I suppose at the time of onboarding, Fidelity had roughly 250 employees in Ireland, and we've since grown to 1,400 plus. But what drew me to Fidelity was the fact that it was a global organization with such a large employee base globally. And I felt I would be able to really grow my career over the long term. And it's been very true. I've had a varied career journey and I've had many opportunities over that time. And what it has enabled is for me to develop my passion along the way, which has been in combining the elements that I really enjoy from communications and event management with aspects of human resources. So the role that I'm currently in allows me to continue to develop and grow as my career has evolved. And as I said earlier, has really given me a great honor to work with individuals who are just starting out their career.
Thanks so much, Elaine. I'm going to go to Helen now, if that's okay.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine Almeida McCardle, I've been in Ireland 20 years. So I originally was born and bred in France, and I came to Ireland 20 years ago for a 3-month internship. So career, first steps in the career and the importance of it, I'm all about it. Absolutely. It's this is why I'm also in the university recruitment and program space. So when I first came for that infamous internship for 3 months, which then turned into 6 months internship, then turned into a 4-year job in a recruitment agency, and then moved into in-house recruitment. And then the university team needed somebody with the recruitment experience, and I just helped out and stayed, and I've never done back since. So really, I was in a tech company for 9 years, but more on the sales side, and touring all the universities across Europe, many countries across Europe, and doing the outreach and explaining about Ireland and explaining about the roles and explaining about the company. And then I took a 6-month break for myself, stopped working, took the break, got bored very quickly with daytime telly, and clearly I couldn't stay and do nothing. So I got myself busy and trained up as a trainer. And then I found Workday. Workday was putting everything together: the university relationship, the recruitment piece, and the training side of things. And so at Workday, 7 years now, and leading the university recruitment and programs effort for all of EMEA, clearly with a team. I can't do it on my own, so very strong team of troopers, really, and pushing through, really getting, again, the first step in careers for grads and interns. And so hiring them, advising them on campus, hiring them, and then making sure that their experience with us is solid and is the right start for their career.
Great, thank you. Milena, I'm going to come to you next, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. Hi, also really nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, I'm Milena. I work as the emerging technology lead at IG Group in London. I'm originally German. I also came to London 12 years ago for originally what was meant to be a 2-month internship at the time literary agency. I have a degree in English literature. So initially I wanted to do something with books, but found out very quickly that that publishing is an industry that's incredibly difficult to break into, and I left the reading books to my personal life, and I initially joined my company IG Group as on the marketing side as a copywriter. Still something to do with words, but as part of, I never considered technology as a career initially, because in back in the day it was something that boys did. That was something that very much was the thing in my school. It was something that boys did. I was not encouraged to look into computer science as a career. So when I then started working in marketing, I had a lot of overlap with technology, and I started understanding technology concepts, and I found it it really suited me, and I really enjoyed working with developers and engineers, and I really enjoyed the overlap between business strategy and technology, and acting as a linchpin between the two. I stuck with IG for 4 years, then I left, went to an organization called Ovo Energy, which at the time was a startup. When I joined them, they are no longer a startup. They're now one of the biggest energy firms in the UK. And I was there for 2 years, and then rejoined IG on the technology side that time, looking after innovation. So I spearhead the IG Group's innovation agenda, or technology innovation agenda. straddling kind of everything from idea management from the ground up, seeing, you know, what new technologies are worth investing in, what are the emerging skills that are coming up in the market that we need to invest in, that we either need to build within our own workforce or, you know, need to recruit for, and also on a kind of culture and community management side of things, what makes an organization innovative, what makes people be able to innovate, and bring all of that together as one big strategy. And that's what I'm passionate about. That's what I really enjoy.
Great, thank you. Fiona, I'm going to come to you next, please.
Hi, so I'm Fiona O'Neil. I also work for Fidelity, but Fidelity International. And just to keep things very, very simple, for some very high level understanding, Fidelity International was a sister company to Fidelity Management Research, FMR, that Elaine works for back in the day. We share the same heritage coming from the Johnson family in Boston, but we are now FIL, Fidelity International, a very separate company, and we operate as a separate organization. I have been with FIL for close to 18 years. And that's important, and perhaps something that we'll come back to later in the discussion, because it's very much been a choice to stay at Fidelity for various reasons. I did a languages degree and then spent 2 years as a consultant in the pharmaceutical marketplace before I moved over to investment management. And again, I think that's really important to emphasize, you know, I'm female. I do not have an economics or a maths degree. But I have, you know, got 18, I think, relatively successful years behind me now in investment management, at the coalface of being an analyst, which is how I started, an equity analyst covering, first of all, utility stocks, followed by consumer stocks, and then through the downturn had my absolute dream job in the worldwide financial crisis of being the autos analyst at Fidelity. I'm a self-confessed petrol head. And then in 2010, I moved over into an assistant portfolio manager role. So working alongside a lead portfolio manager, running at that time $15 billion of assets under management, investing in a whole host of different European companies. And then in 2013, I moved into a management role. And I've been in a management role ever since and worn various different hats. My current hat is as a director of equities within our global investment research function. That means that I'm responsible at Fidelity within that global investment research for making sure that what we do is done within a global framework, and that there is global consistency all the way from how an analyst will rate a stock to how we might compensate our analysts. I also coach and mentor natural resources analysts based here in London, and then I also manage our global sector portfolio managers. So I'll run their quarterly fund reviews, for example, and you know, work very closely with them in their relationships with clients and trying to attract new clients, as well as generate the best alpha we can for existing clients. Finally, I'm the Director of Equities with our lead in global investment research for early careers, and that's really very much why I'm here today on this panel. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'll touch on a few more things as we go through, I'm sure.
Great, thanks so much, Fiona. And last but not least, Maeve, please, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Hannah. I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you very, very much for inviting me. So Maeve McLean, I am living in Ireland, in the sunny southeast in Wexford, and I'm Chief People Officer for Lidl Ireland and Lidl Northern Ireland. We are based out of Dublin. Our head office is in Tala, and I have worked with the organisation for coming up on 17 years. So I was trying to count the amount of years experience within our companies, and I lost count. But I have to say it is impressive professional service that we're looking at today. I joined Lidl actually I'll go back a little bit further. I studied business studies and leisure management in DIT College Brew Street, which is now TU Dublin, and moved into the hospitality sector. Having worked in Ireland for a couple of years, I went to work in Germany, And my plan was also to stay for a short period of time, and I came back 6 years later. I worked in various different businesses in Berlin, and I was thinking about defining moments in my life or defining moments in my career, and that was probably one of them, because it was when I became fluent in German, and that had an impact then in the future then as well in the path that I chose. I moved back to Ireland in 2002, worked for a property management company, and then 2005 saw an advertisement for an area manager role with Lidl. Having lived in Germany, I love all things German. German language, German food, German wine, German beer, German people, and to work for a German organization in Ireland in retail sounded really, really exciting to me. The role was mostly exciting because it was all about management of people more than anything else. As an area manager, you have 4 or 5 stores. Each of those stores will have 20, 30, 40 staff. And it is about bringing all of those resources together and getting the very best out of 4 or 5 teams, management team working with you as well. So thoroughly enjoyed the role, and it was fantastic grounding in learning what our business was all about. Everything from property to personnel management to finance to IT, everything under the sun. Kind of what our graduate program looks like now actually is that experience of working in lots of different areas and gaining lots of different experience as well. After that, I got an opportunity to move into our head office, into personnel management. It wasn't really a HR function at the time. It was very much personnel management, personnel administration. And very basically, we made sure everybody got paid, everybody had a contract, and I put out some fires when it came to employment law. So from then, I built our HR function into a very, very strong HR business that it is now, of talent management, talent acquisition, employee relations, and HR operations. In the last year, we have restructured and put a lot of focus on HR services, and that service one-stop shop for employees and for management. So yeah, 2013, I got an opportunity to go and work in our head office in Germany. Which is, it's between it's a place called Neckarsulm. It's between Stuttgart and Frankfurt. And I was there for 2013 to 2016. Thoroughly enjoyed it, totally different experience as well. And we'll probably touch on some of the things that happened to that part of my career when it comes to being a female in a very, very male-dominated environment, and what that looked like and what that felt like. I moved back to Ireland then in 2016, where I got a fantastic opportunity to join the board here. And as I say, now head up our people function. We have 6,500 employees, north and south. And yeah, I don't plan on going anywhere soon. So I think this is it for another while.
That's great. I think it's about 100+ years between us that we've
Thanks, Hannah. You've got
working in. And I guess, you know, that's quite interesting, because if we look at the wealth of experience we've got between us in terms of, and the experiences that we've had in different companies, I'm quite interested in what we think it is about a company's culture that makes you feel supported, particularly as a woman, that makes you want to stay. Elaine, I'm going to come to you first, because you've obviously had a really long period in your current role. What is it that kind of keeps you motivated, particularly, I guess, as a woman in this industry, to kind of stay where you are? What's the kind of cultural characteristics that you think are important?
Yeah, well, I suppose when I transitioned or was looking for my next role as I was working in PR consultancy, I was really looking for a role that aligned back to what I enjoyed doing on a day-to-day basis. So I was quite selective in my shortlisting of potential opportunities. I certainly...
I think we might have lost Elaine. She did say her Wi-Fi was a little bit challenging. So we're going to have to, I'm sure she'll be rejoining, but I wonder if someone else would be willing to just pick up on that point around kind of culture and what we think is important to kind of retain women. What are the kind of features of the cultures that you're in that you feel really supports women? Helen, can I come to you, please?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, happy to jump on this one. I think I think culture is key, and it's really how not the company talks about the culture, but how the employees talk about the culture. And I think when you get into a company and now with social media, you can see everything and people's opinion and all of this. So you can get a sense for what is the brand, what's the brand saying, but what the people are actually saying. And then when you get into the interviews, and at the time I was lucky enough to have face-to-face interviews and actually walking into an office, you feel it, how the receptionist welcomes you, how people talk to the receptionist, and how people going in and out of the office, at lunchtime, how they interact with each other, you get that feel. And then during the interview, it's really what they say and how they talk from their gut feeling. This is how I work. It's, it has to be a feeling. It has to be the human connection and the human experience and their actual story of what they go through in the day-to-day work. And so the culture is key, and it's not what they say, it's what they do. And I think I've been really lucky in the companies I've worked, and Workday, again, it's quite impressive. Like, we have values, as many companies would have, and the number one value is employee, because the employees are happy, that everything flows after that. So we would give the customers a good experience, we would focus on the customers, etc. And it's really so it's not necessarily specific just to female, it's the equity and how it's inclusive of everybody. Because clearly we're here as a female panel, but as I said, I'm not native English, I'm not even from Ireland, and other people in this panel have traveled as well. So it's not just about being a female, and we're probably going to touch on bias, but it's all the intersectionality, all the little bits that make a person themselves. And that's how the culture, how the company embraces that, and not just saying, oh, that person is French, oh, that person is a female, oh, she's a female in leadership. It's really the whole attitude against, against real life and for what's actually happening. So it is 100% key for me. And this is how I applied for the company I believe did the right thing, and then how it transpired during the interviews.
And Maeve, that must be something that's particularly important in your role, I guess, as a sort of people officer, thinking about culture and making culture inclusive and accessible, for women, obviously specifically for this panel. But I just wonder about some of the things maybe that you've implemented or done that have particularly kind of supported that female-friendly culture.
A lot in the last few years, I have to say. It's become much more relevant and much more important, because everybody's experience of culture is going to be very specific and very individual. So for us, it's really important that the policies that we have to support the culture isn't the policies, and policies are just one part of it, but the policies that we have that support the culture, that they are as broad as they can possibly be. Specifically supporting, and it's not specifically supporting women. So when I think about our compassionate leave policy, for example, that we've now extended to early pregnancy loss, and that is now considered a bereavement, and paid time off goes with that. That is regardless of gender and regardless of circumstance, because that also applies in the case of surrogacy, for example. Our fertility policy, the same. Although it is, a woman who has to carry until science moves on to another direction altogether, our fertility policy applies across the board as well. But something like our menopause policy that we brought in this year, whilst it sounds very specific to women, the policy is very much around awareness. And that's supporting all of the managers and all of the employees in our business on understanding what's menopause about, and how do we support the women in the business. But the policy is there to support both men and women. And I think it's interesting what Helena said about the culture being the stories that you hear people telling, how people interact with each other, how behave. I can write all of the policies in the world. Really, and I was talking to our CEO about this a couple of weeks ago, what it really comes down to then is, how is that policy applied in tough times? That's your culture, particularly in tough times when you need people to come together. You need people to support each other, managers to support employees, employees to support each other, employees to support their managers. So we can have all the policies, and we do, we've lots of them, but it's how they're applied. That's particularly in tough times, that individual reaction to a situation is really where your culture comes from, and the policies just support that.
Yeah, that's great. I'm interested also, I guess, coming to Fiona now, because obviously you're in a particularly kind of, I guess, an industry that maybe is not seen as female friendly potentially. And is that, does culture have to work harder, do you think, for women in your industry? Or is there anything different in your industry that maybe from other organisations?
I'm not sure it's the culture has to work harder, though that's not to say that we haven't had to work on things. And I'll come on and touch on those. But just first of all, I think it's about the messaging, and it's really making sure that what we do is understood. And one of the big challenges that we will still face at the graduate level is really understanding what is asset management and how does that differ versus investment banking, for example. And that's definitely something that we as an asset management industry need to continue to work much harder at. It's all about stock picking performance. That the stock market isn't open during the night. I mean, sure, there's a global investment market, but you're not working on a deal till all hours of the night or even the next morning. And I think it's more about having the resilience and the intellectual curiosity to want to understand what makes a company work and what therefore might make a good investment. And actually, time and time again, we're proving that women are just as good, if sometimes not even better than men at doing this. And certainly by having a diverse mix of analysts on our team. And by that, I don't just mean gender, but a diversity of backgrounds means a diversity of thought. And that can lead to much deeper investment debates. And, time and time again, we're proving that can lead to the generation of stronger alpha. So it's about getting that message out there. If I take my own example, I started as a female. I have had time out due to pregnancy loss, bereavement. I've also had, 2 fairly recent maternity leaves. I work extremely hard during my working hours, but I still manage to see my children in the morning and in the evening. And actually, as a result of enhanced parental leave that Fidelity has recently introduced, we're making sure that is more the norm for the male investors on our team too. And we are massively in favour of dynamic working. Even post the pandemic, we are not mandating that people have to come into the office 2 or 3 days a week, that people have to do certain days in the office. We're very much trusting individuals to find their equilibrium, find what works for them. And I therefore feel extremely fortunate that I can be in the financial services industry, but still be a very present and full-time mummy at the same time.
I mean, Milena, you're obviously also in an industry like tech that has been perhaps more challenging for women, and you've obviously I suppose come through your career there, and I wonder what you've seen that may have changed for technology, or some of the things that are kind of new for technology to help attract women into that space.
It's not just technology, it's financial technology.
My organization, the double whammy.
It really comes with all the trappings of a business that straddles kind of two very male-dominated domains. But for me, and what I've seen really is the desire and the incentive to change, because what we're really seeing, and I'm sure you're all seeing that as well, is the war for talent is real. And as a technology organization, or any organization that wants to stay competitive, cannot afford to. It is simply not sustainable to keep fishing from the same smaller and smaller pool. So we have to widen our intake. We have to look at, we have to look at what makes our organization attractive to not just women, but people from all other backgrounds. organizations that don't do that won't be able to operate sustainably. So there is just a very real incentive, and we're looking at the data. We're looking, any organization that struggles to attract or retain women will face difficulties. So we are looking at the data. We are surveying our female employees. What is it that that they like, but also what is it that they struggle with? And based on that data, we are developing our hiring and retention policies. It's really good to see that we can all talk about doing the right thing and being more inclusive, but also there is a very real business incentive behind it.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something quite interesting there, because obviously hiring is an important first step, but actually a lot of it is about retention as well once people walk through the door. And one of the things that is often used as a tool for retention is mentors and role models, I suppose, as well. And I wonder whether anyone has any particular experiences of really good role modeling or mentorship that they've had in their career that's worked particularly well for them. I'm going to come to Elaine, because I know we lost you in the first question.
I'm sorry,
so,
I don't know how much you heard, but I got disconnected, unfortunately.
It was swiftly picked up by the rest of the panel, so you're absolutely fine. But I'd love to hear from you as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, I do think mentors play a really important role at any stage in your career, but in particular in your early career. And I have to say, I've had, and I still have, the honor of working with some really amazing, talented women and mentors today. I think if I come back to your question, when I joined Fidelity initially, I was saying before I got cut off that I had a lot of support as I joined. And I was working really closely with one of my female colleagues, and she is an amazing leader and role model, and I continue to look up to her. But over the years, she did mentor and advocate for me. And I think, advocates are just as important as mentors and role models, because they play a really important role in being that voice who will speak for you when decisions, I suppose, are being made about you when you're not in the room. So it's really important not just to have those mentors and role models, but to seek out those advocates as well. But I think from my experience of working with her, she really inspired me and helped me to continue to grow and develop, and challenged me at times. Mentors come in different shapes and forms. You can have the formalized mentors through mentor programs, but a lot of my mentors have been actually informal as well over the years, and I've leveraged them for different things. That could be career development, confidence building, problem solving, or critical thinking, or the more tactical hands-on learning opportunities. So I think mentors come in different forms, and it's about identifying what your need is at any particular point in time to lean into the right person. But I suppose from my own perspective, I really enjoy being a mentor as well. And I sit on the Technology University Dublin SARE Mentoring Advisory Board. I've participated in mentoring and support, in particular, our female technology interns by partnering those with members from our women's leadership group, so that they can, have that support while they're on placement with us as well.
Yeah. And
from a role model perspective, I think anybody can be a role model, but it's really about what you see in an individual, and that sense of, do they inspire you to become something else, and do they make you see what you can become? And in some cases, then it's about identifying those role models to lean in for mentor opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Hélène, what about you in terms of kind of role models and mentors that have helped shape your career?
Really very similar to Elaine. I think the first person I identified as a mentor, he had no idea. At the end, I told him how grateful I was for his support and how much I learned and how great of a mentor he was. And he giggled because he didn't realize any of this was happening. So it's about identifying the skills that you're interested in developing, or, you know, the areas that you want to learn about, and learning from the person. I've had official mentors as well. And it, you know, with structured or unstructured, it's really about being ready to be a recipient of mentoring. And again, it doesn't have to be an official one. You don't have to sign up somewhere and follow steps. Even though clearly we've created mentorships as well, and it's always a good place to start. But you need to be ready to be a mentee, and you need to grab the opportunity, and you need to lead your own mentoring. So I think it really is a two-way street, and you need to be ready for it. One thing that's trending recently, and there's something really cool that I've seen at Workday, and I've never heard that before, so I want to bring to the table and see if anybody else in the panel has seen this. At Workday, what we've launched recently is a reverse mentoring, especially on the diversity space, whereby people who identify from underrepresented groups, so it could be female, it could be ethnicity, or, you know, any self-identified underrepresented group, and they mentor a senior leader about their own experience. So about their experience of being, let's say, a female in tech or Black in tech, etc. And that is, I really thought the idea, first confusing, but I really think it's the right way. It's the fresh way to go. And again, even though the mentee in that case is a senior person, it's all about being receptive to the experience.
Fiona, I can see you nodding quite a lot with that as well. Have you had a mentee that's really kind of helped you understand things the other way around?
I've had a mentee who didn't want to be mentored.
Okay.
So the point about you have to open yourself up to being mentored. You know, I got to the point with that particular individual, well, you don't want me to speak on your behalf because you think that might create the wrong impression, which, you know, is not really trusting me to do things in a tactful way. You kind of just want to sound off to me. You don't really want to listen to a piece of advice. So what exactly do you want to get out of this mentorship? And I find that hugely frustrating. Actually, when I think back to the mentorships, and this, please don't misunderstand me, this isn't to say that formal mentorship programs don't work. They absolutely do. They can. I've seen it work very well. But I think when I think back to, you know, mentors that I've had, they've sort of been informal ones, where I've sort of really clicked with somebody very naturally, and sort of, I hope I've brought something as the mentee to them, in causing them to stop and think when I've had a challenge, you know, that they haven't necessarily known the answer right away. So I brought something to them, and equally they've brought something to me. And actually a couple of my best informal mentors through the years have actually been men, not women. But they sort of taught, you know, one of them continues to inspire me, that even though he is a guy, he values his family time. And I really respect that in him. And the fact that he will openly say to me, I leave the office at 5:30 and I am home to help my wife with bath time. And then I log on again. And, you know, actually hearing that from a guy just is so powerful. But, you know, equally, he will tell me that when he's at work, he's 100% on work. And, you know, he's the kind of person that has also taught me over the years that when you turn up to a meeting, don't just sit there on the edge of the meeting, regardless of your background, regardless of how much or how little you feel you know, but you're in that meeting room for a reason. Show up and participate. So for all of those reasons, that person is somebody who continues to inspire me and who I continue to learn from.
And I think that point about kind of showing up for meetings and kind of speaking up is really important, because actually we hear a lot about imposter syndrome with women, that they don't necessarily put themselves forward. And I wonder whether, I suppose, how much of the barriers we see in the workplace are self-imposed often by women because of their perception, and how much of them are actually real and present and there. And I'm going to come to Milena, because I know technology finance, there's actually a question in the chat about kind of being in largely male dominated teams. And I wonder whether you've experienced any of that in your role, and how you've kind of overcome it as a female in that kind of industry.
Sorry, it's a question about...
What was the question? Sorry. Yes, imposter syndrome, is that kind of more prevalent within largely male-dominated teams? Have you seen that come into play? How have you overcome that potentially in your career?
So I think the one thing that I've learned is that absolutely everyone suffers from imposter syndrome from time to time, and actually working in a largely male-dominated environment, I see that much more. I think as women, we have maybe given more tools to express the fact that we are suffering from imposter syndrome. We have been discussing this for a really long time. It's been a thing for a really long time. Men, I think, are slowly coming to it and understanding that this is a thing. But for instance, our female CEO has told me once that at least every time she speaks to investors, she has at least one moment where she goes, "Holy smokes, how did I end up here?" So male colleagues have opened up to me and said this is very much something that they suffer from. So actually coming back to the mentoring question that you had earlier, one of the best pieces of advice that my very first mentor gave me once is, don't compare your insides to everybody else's outsides. So you only know what goes on within yourself. You are comparing yourself to others who are putting their best foot forward. So I think always remember you are where you are because of that. There is a reason, especially early on in your careers. You are hired for your potential much more than for the skills that you already have. So don't stop learning, always stay curious, but do trust yourself for the contribution that you make.
Yeah, I had a mentor that said to me, always believe in your place at the table, which I thought was really fantastic. And that's really stuck with me. She said that to me probably 15 years ago. And it's something I've always held with me for ever since. Just remember that you're meant to be sat around this table, and people are interested in your opinion. We've got quite a lot of questions in the chat, so I do want to kind of give us the opportunity to go to those. I've just got one more kind of topic that I thought would be interesting, that's kind of I suppose real now, is that we're coming out of the tail end of the pandemic, and McKinsey published a report at the end of last year about kind of women in the workplace, and they said that women are more burnt out now than they were a year ago, and I think often we talk about kind of the pandemic in terms of a move to flexible working, but I wonder whether what impact do you think it's had? Have we moved forward or have we moved backwards as a result of the pandemic? Maeve, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay. Sorry, tough question.
I'm going to try not get on my soapbox. Research has shown that women over the last 2 years have had greater challenges because the responsibilities in the home have fallen more towards women than men. I know many men who contribute as much, if not more. Him indoors here definitely does more at home, but that doesn't change the fact that that is the fact. The fact is that women have had to do more, and organizations and companies can do so much, but there's a societal shift that's needed and is still needed. And it's something I'm extremely passionate about, because I think it starts at a very, very young age. It starts at home, in whatever kind of family you have, whatever mix of family life you have, or I think it starts in schools. And I think it is about breaking the bias, and that is, and empowering everybody. And that's empowering a 7-year-old boy or empowering a 7-year-old girl. Empowering a 7-year-old girl to believe that she can do everything she wants to do, and empowering a 7-year-old boy that he should do everything that his sister is doing as well. So I think it's a much bigger thing. I think women have unfortunately come out worse from this. There's so much. This is something you could have webinar after webinar on this topic, whether it's about the responsibilities in the home that have had to be picked up more by women, homeschooling, even just the general housework, that women are expected to do more of in many households. Even the way we work, and there's a lot as well that talked about as well how we work and working online, and how challenging that is for being visible and for being seen and for talent development and for career progression. All of these things we have to think about and be very active about, I think, in the next couple of years, because the last 2 years have had an impact. But I do believe that organizations, whether it be Lidl with all of our great policies, or Fidelity, or the other organizations that you all work with, that is only so much. I think the societal problem is massive, and I'm shocked sometimes by some of the conversations that I hear women having, that sound like conversations from the 50s.
And there's an interesting question in the chat actually that's linked to that from Susie Brand. She says, I still see so many boards and senior management structures that are dominated by middle-aged white men in both the corporate and charity sector. How much would you say corporate culture has changed in the past 10 years in terms of gender equality, and how can it be improved? What would be the kind of things what would be the big things that we would change in terms of corporate culture to help move this conversation forwards? Elaine, let me come to you.
Yeah, I can come in. So I certainly think it is changing. And I think even if we take this topic as, one of those changes, I do see the spotlight that continues to be shone on this topic. So, Maeve touched on it a little bit there as well. It is around how do we continue with more education, awareness, and what we can all do collectively to make a difference and break down those barriers that exist. But if I think back to 10 years ago, right, I wouldn't have heard much around unconscious bias or allyship and topics like that. Whereas today, in particular, where I work at Fidelity, we all have to complete unconscious bias training, as an example. So I do think it is shifting. And I do think that spotlight that has been shown on the topic is definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. And the allyship point, I think, has been a big shift more recently, that it's not just about women supporting women and women changing things. It's about we've got to get everyone working towards the goals, whether that's gender or disability or ethnicity. Ellen, what sort of would you say are the kind of key shifts that we have made and need to make moving forward?
Yeah, I think the culture of allies is everything. I think we've heard the pride groups talking about allies for a while. It's for all underrepresented groups, really. And I think that's where it makes a difference. And then you have senior sponsorship that make things happen. And often they're ally and often they're not from that group. And it's the awareness. There's no two ways about it. It is the awareness and the fact that we have these panels. And I was attending one this morning as well. The more we talk, the more it becomes, an obvious thing. So when you hear it for the first time, it's like, oh, it's a revelation. And the more you hear it, and the more it's like, yeah, of course, it absolutely makes sense. And we used to do it the wrong way. Now we're fixing it. And it really is about the awareness. And when I'm talking about bias, the unconscious bias, clearly we can't control it. And it's that awareness and that constant talk about it. That's the light bulb moment when somebody going to turn around. It's like, I never knew that. I never realized that. I didn't think that happened in Ireland. Those really small things, which is about the everyday talking about it. And I couldn't agree more. Like, it's how you talk to the kids. It's how you talk to, about it at home. It's like, like a girl. What does that mean? You run like a girl. Just silly things like this. There's a good video that I enjoy about, like a girl. What does that mean? And it's planting the seed from a young age. And maybe we're talking about, things like in the 50s. To be honest, the generation who's going into the workforce, they have the mix and the equity, ingrained. They get it. It's normal. It's the way to go. Yes, there's things to fix, but we all know we need to fix it. So I think that's it. It's the awareness and being part of the everyday thing. And it's about realizing that we can't do it on our own. So the allyship is key to the mix.
And it's an important point you raised about kind of speaking up and being kind of highlighting things when you see them. And I wonder, Fiona, if I can come to you, if you've got any advice for someone who maybe sees that sort of unconscious bias potentially kind of in operation in the workplace. What advice would you give them to kind of feel confident to raise it?
I think we all have a responsibility to bring about change. And, if I can only speak on behalf of Fidelity, but, nobody is going to judge you. In fact, you're probably going to be applauded for being brave enough to stick your hand up and say, there's a challenge here. There's something that we need to think about. There's something that we need to address. It's one of the things that we did. One of the reasons that we thought long and hard about things like shared parental, it was feedback from people who did see the unconscious bias. So the unconscious bias that existed against women, how could a woman be a successful portfolio manager if she needed to take time out to have a family and therefore break her track record? So one of the ways we responded to that was to think about things like, well, where do we need to put co-portfolio manager structures in place? So even if one of the two goes off on a maternity leave, that track record continues to run. And then it wasn't enough to stop there, because then you had some individual males who sadly would make very incorrect comments when the woman returned from maternity leave. I had somebody throw one of these comments at me too, which was, well, I'm a guy. I'm far too important. I couldn't have possibly taken time off. The only way that we were able to address that was because I was brave enough to speak up. And obviously, our CEO, who is female, and other senior females at Fidelity were horrified to hear that such comments were being made. But it's sort of all of our duty to make sure that we, make the organization aware of those comments that are pervading, so that the organization then can address them and can make the kind of changes that are needed. So I think, as hard as it is, as difficult it is, I would just encourage everybody to try and be brave. We all have a part to play in changing the narrative.
Thank you. And I think that, we're coming close to the end of our session. And I don't want to kind of finish up without giving everyone the opportunity to share, I guess, what would be their key piece of advice to give to young women entering the workplace in terms of what advice you would give them about the best tools to make them successful. Milena, can I come to you first on that one, please?
Yeah, sure. And I think this kind of goes back to the point that I was making earlier, like that one key piece of advice that I got that I would always share again is don't compare your insides to everyone else's outside. There is believe in, as you said earlier, believe in your seat at the table. Your contribution is valued. You are at this point in your career hired for your potential much more than for the skills that you have now. So yeah, that is my advice. Stay curious, don't stop learning, and put yourself in the places where the conversations happen.
Amazing, thank you. Maeve, what about you?
Very, very much the same. Be authentic, be true to yourself and to who you are and to your principles. Don't let them stand in your way. Don't trip over them along the way or let them become hurdles. Use them, leverage them to the best of your ability in whatever circumstance or whatever situation you're in. I love Milena's comment about be curious. Your whatever phase of your journey you're on, there is so much to learn. And in a world where we're talking so much about diversity and inclusion, there's so much to learn from the people that you wouldn't naturally lean towards or go towards or gravitate to. So seek out other opinions, seek out other people, seek out other viewpoints, and open up your mind to learning from them.
And I think that's really interesting as well, because it sort of aligns to the point that Fiona was making earlier about it's not necessarily the right thing to get a mentor that's like you. You know, Fiona was talking about a fantastic male mentor that she had. It's almost like seek out the mentors that maybe are different and can add a different perspective rather than necessarily someone that's, I can see, you know, that's who I'd want to be in 3 years' time, for example. Elaine, what about you? What advice would you give to the younger generation?
I would say stand tall, you belong, and really just make it happen. And that that imposter syndrome is going nowhere, and it will change over time, but it's going to be there. So I think learn to turn it into adrenaline that gets you going, and it gets that buzz, you know, in your belly and gets you going.
Don't be afraid to be afraid. Fiona, what about you?
I think I would echo what Maeve said. Be authentic, be true to yourself. You know, I was a female when I started in 2004, there were a lot less females than there are today. I was also a female from the north of England who spoke with a north of England accent. And I remember saying in an investment meeting once about, well, let's look at what the graph tells us. And somebody corrected me, one of the guys, and said, you mean, tell us what the chart says. And I said, no, actually, I mean graph. That's what I mean. I'm just going to tell it like it is because I am who I am. And I might use a different word, but it doesn't make my brain any less capable. So in fact, in many instances, I just dug my heels in and I spoke even more with a northern accent. So, you know, it speaks to what has already been said. Be authentic, be true to yourself. You have earned a seat at the table. Seize the opportunity that you're given. And at the beginning, you've also got a free pass to ask as many questions as you want. So don't be afraid to ask questions, because through asking questions, you learn, and you should never, ever be embarrassed to ask questions.
Thank you. Elaine, I'm coming to you last, which is always the hardest one because a lot of stuff has already been said, but is there anything additional that you would add to the conversation?
Yeah, I suppose my mantra is always, and we've talked about imposter syndrome and, you know, believing in yourself, but to always tell yourself you've got this. So it doesn't matter what the situation, wherever you feel like the barriers are up there, just remind yourself of that. And really go for it. Don't be afraid to take risks and really lean into your career. You have put the time, the effort in. You know, and many people have said this already, you deserve that seat in the organization, at that table, in that role, and just continue to go for it and really believe in yourself and have your own back.
Thank you so much. And look, thank you so much to all of you. This has been an absolutely fantastic and inspiring conversation for me as much as anyone, I'm sure. So great hearing all of your stories, great hearing all of your advice. And I think, you know, the kind of key things that I've picked out from this conversation is encouraging people to seek out mentors, to encouraging people to speak up if they see things that they need support with, but also just to make sure that they really think about the organisation that they want to work for, and really kind of find out about the culture to make sure it's the right fit for them, because ultimately, if it's the right fit, you will be successful and you will thrive. So thank you so much to everyone. It's been absolutely fantastic. And thank you to everyone who's been watching. Goodbye.